Up until a couple of months ago, I was not a big fan of freezing sourdough, and yet to be fair, I'd never really tried it. But now freezing has become an integral part of my routine. I waste absolutely nothing, but it also helps me with scheduling. If I've got a busy old week coming up, then I might bake 2 loaves of sourdough together. One of the loaves we eat fresh, and then the other one I pop in the freezer. But I'll say this, whichever method you do choose to kind of freeze your sourdough, the number one golden rule, the one you must always follow, is to let your sourdough cool completely before freezing. Now, I've tried just about every way possible to freeze sourdough, but I have got 2 clear favourites. Let's have a look and see what they are. Right, so first up, this has got to be the king of convenience, pre-slicing the sourdough. After cooling, I slice up the entire loaf. I place a small piece of non-stick paper between each slice, and that's going to stop that sourdough from sticking together, which is awesome because it makes it easy to use one slice at a time from the freezer. I really like using Ziploc freezer bags so that I can push out any excess air, and with a quick clean they can be reused many times too. But don't forget to label and date your bags. Oh, and don't throw away those little bits of paper either, they can be reused several times too. And remember, this doesn't just work for freshly baked sourdough. If my sourdough is a couple of days old and I'm starting to get a bit worried that I won't use it before it goes too hard, I just slice that up and pop it in the freezer too. These slices are perfect for toasting. They defrost in 15 minutes or so, but they can also be toasted from frozen. I just use that little frosty setting on my toaster, and they make wicked grilled cheese sandwiches, but you will need to defrost the slices before you build the sandwich and grill it. You can even dice these slices up and use them as croutons, and it just so happens I've got a cheeky little panzanella salad that this would work perfectly for. I'll link to that at the end of this video. Now, I don't generally use these slices to eat fresh, but if you wanted to, you could revive them. You could defrost a slice, pop it into a pan covered with a lid, and then warm that slice through in the oven for a few minutes. But don't let these slices get buried at the bottom of your freezer, otherwise you're going to quickly turn them into homemade breadcrumbs. These are going to keep happily for an ice age in your freezer, but ideally use them in about 4 weeks. I've actually left them up until 8 weeks with minimal degrading in quality. This method is the king of convenience because you always have sourdough on tap. It's quick to defrost and turn into something special, and best of all, it helps us minimize our wastage. Right, method number 2. This is as close as you can get to the real deal. After the initial bake, I cool the loaf down completely and I pop it into a Ziploc bag. Gently squeeze out the air and then pop it straight into the freezer. Same rules apply, no burying this at the bottom. And then when it's time to use the loaf, I defrost it thoroughly. I've tried baking sourdough from frozen and it never really works that well for me. I never get the same result as when I defrost it first. And this only takes me around 3 hours to defrost at 30 degrees Celsius. Now, there's another bonus if you defrost the loaf first. Your oven is going to burn less electricity, so you're saving money too. And I know it means you've got to wait around, and what happens if you need bread right now? Well, you've got that sliced sourdough in the freezer, the king of convenience, waiting to go. So be patient, have a cup of tea, a nice slice of toast, and defrost your sourdough loaf properly. After defrosting, we can slide it into an oven that's been preheated to 150 degrees Celsius, and then I just cover that with a large pot. Now, I know it's popular to spray the loaf with water, but I haven't found any benefit to spritzing the loaf, so I don't do it. But if you'd like to, then fill your boots. You're certainly not going to do it any damage. Now, I bake the loaf covered for about 10 minutes until it's soft and warm. Then I remove the pot and let that crust crisp up. This normally takes about 5 to 10 minutes. Now, when I bake my loaf the first time around, I normally obtain a moderate colour on the crust. This means that I've got a little bit of room to play with when I'm reheating it. So if you're planning on freezing your sourdough, be careful not to let it get too dark during that initial bake. Now, I've tried to part bake sourdough, freeze it and then rebake it, but I'm not really a fan. It works, but I never seem to achieve the same depth of colour on the outside when I try and rebake it. So for me, I always bake the loaf properly the first time around, then I freeze it, defrost it thoroughly, and then bake it a second time. It works a treat, almost the real deal. Then you just leave your sourdough to cool properly before slicing it and use it as you would any other fresh loaf. Now again, this loaf will keep for a long time in the freezer, but I'd suggest eating it in 1 to 2 months. I'm sure not everyone was as late at the party as me, so if you're already freezing sourdough and you've got a favourite technique or method, I'd love to hear about it. Let me know down in the comments. And as ever, all of the information you may need will be available on the blog, so you can follow the link in the description to check it out. And if you're looking for some really interesting ways to use your frozen sourdough, then be sure to check out this panzanella video right here. A huge thank you for watching. I'll see you again very soon. Stay tuned.